It's horse racing time on Prime Sports Network, and we've got two big Kentucky Derby prep races to talk about. Chad Summers is back. How's it going, Chad?
It's going well.
And John Hardoon is not. So John will be back next week, and unless he makes a surprise visit here in the next few minutes, he's having some technical difficulties. So we'll get him back next week for sure when we have three big Kentucky Derby prep races to preview: the Wood, the Bluegrass, and the Santa Anita Derby. So, how would you rate next Saturday's day of horse racing? Would it be like top 5 or 6 of the year between the Breeders' Cup and, well, I should say top
No,
10?
no, no,
No.
no. But again, look, I love the Kentucky Derby. I'd love to win the Kentucky Derby, but for me, these races and the attempt to get into the Kentucky Derby is difficult because it's not the best horse that wins the Kentucky Derby, and we're seeing it this year with the points where the point system in theory was a good idea because it was encouraging horses to run more often, and you win the bigger races you're in. But now we're seeing here the leader in the clubhouse right now, Two Phils. He's a nice horse. He won 100 points for winning a Turfway Park race. He spent the winter losing to many other horses who now aren't going to qualify for the Derby because they don't have enough points. You have other horses like Major Dude who get 40 points for running second in the Turfway race. He's completely a grass horse. Doesn't appear to be a dirt horse, and he'll get in over other dirt horses. In Sunland Park over the weekend last Sunday, horse had gotten beat his last two races by like 50 lengths, wins the race, and now he's in. And this is very much the Rich Strike concept where everybody thinks that every horse can win the Derby because Rich Strike did. So it's an interesting year. I don't think this is the best crop of 3-year-olds we've ever had. And it's just been, they've taken their turns kind of beating each other. Other than maybe Forte, who we'll talk about here in a minute. It just seems like there's kind of a log jam with the rest of the horses. And so yeah, it's exciting to have, good races, not just Derby races, but a lot of other strong stake races on the cards throughout. But it wouldn't be among my top 10 favorite days of the year. No.
Besides the Breeders' Cup and the Triple Crown races, give me a couple.
Well, I mean, Dubai, I've
All
enjoyed
right.
my there last Saturday. Obviously, the Saudi races were big as well. Ascot, I mean, the international stage races are always good. Saratoga for the meet, Keeneland for the meet, Del Mar. You know, it's tough to sit there and say one day in particular, other than these big days, Breeders' Cup, Dubai, Saudi, places like that.
How was the race last week?
In Dubai, it
Yes.
was fantastic. Look, I mean, the World Cup itself was won by a horse who didn't look like he figured. And at the start of the race, a quarter mile in, he was last by many, many lengths, and nobody thought he had a chance. He was an ordinary horse for a long time. He was 3 for 23 to start his career on the
Wow.
grass, and they switched him to dirt. And now he's 5 for 6 lifetime on the dirt, and he just won a $12 million race. And we could see him in races like the Arc de Triomphe in the fall, and then very possibly the Breeders' Cup Classic. He's off for the summer. He doesn't handle the heat very well, so we won't see him for a little while. But that was impressive, and obviously very emotional. The UAE Derby, son of mine, your biscuits getting the victory in gate to wire fashion after Biscuits had done so well over there in Dubai, winning 2 Golden Shaheen's. He wins the UAE Derby, and now he
Awesome.
himself qualifies for the Derby, and so we'll have some rooting interest there in Derma Sadagaki, a son of Minder Biscuits, as he's one of the 20 horses that will be taking their spot in the starting gate in the first Saturday in May.
Yeah. Pretty much we're down to the stretch run now. After this week, there's just 5 more races, Derby prep races to go. One is in what, England, I guess?
Yeah, listen, and that again, this is another one where years past it was irrelevant. Nobody cared. Nobody ever came over from that European circuit. But it sounds very much like there's a couple horses. If they win, they're going to take their talents to Louisville, and they're going to qualify. It's a thing that was put in to encourage international entrance, and it looks like the European winner is going to come over and try the Derby, he'll be a long shot in the race, but he'll take up one of those 20 stalls. And the winner of the Japanese road to the Kentucky Derby, who was third in the UAE Derby, is also accepted the invitation. So he's on his way to Kentucky as well for Mr. Yohi. So it's Yahagi. It's
Are we going to have the most imports then?
A little bit of an international. What's that?
Are we going to have the most imports this year in the Derby?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's probably going to be 3. So, I mean, the most we had in the past was 2. So, and there was a chance for a second there was going to be 4 because the horse that was second in the UAE Derby also at the time, Northern Farm said that they were probably going to go, but they've changed their mind. So, but first and third from UAE Derby, and very possibly, depending on the outcome on Sunday, the winner of that race in Europe will come here having never run a race on the dirt before. So,
all right. How impressed were you by King's Barnes, who won the Louisiana Derby last week? Because King's Barnes, morning line favorite 6-1, went off, I believe, as the favorite.
No, he wasn't the favorite.
Second choice to Instant Coffee, yeah. And he went pretty much wire to wire. How impressed were you by his performance?
Impressed. He's a nice horse. All the credit in the world goes to Flavian Pratt, and all the discredit in the world goes to the 12 jockeys that were chasing him, because that was ridiculous for a Derby prep to go a half in almost 50, to go 6 furlongs in 1:14, the slowest race in the day. I don't know why the numbers came back as strong as they did as far as buyers and cheap numbers, because it was abysmal that nobody else challenged him. I thought Chase's Road would be closer to the pace. He took back and yeah, I mean, Chase's Road, to me, Florent Giroux rode the race trying to qualify for the Derby rather than try and win the Louisiana Derby, and they knew that third place was going to get them in, and that's what they did. They finished third, but I thought it was pretty strange how slow they went in that race. That was, I mean, pretty ridiculous, to be honest.
And Instant Coffee, why? What happened?
I mean, he's a closer that they went so slow he couldn't close. So, I mean, he needed to come in the top 5 to qualify for the Derby. I'm not sure that Louis Saez was aware of that. And when he couldn't catch King's Barn, kind of took it easy a little bit, knowing that he wasn't going to win the race. And it's going to end up costing Instant Coffee a chance at the Derby. He's going to end up not having enough points, despite looking like he was in a great spot on points going into the race.
And when you run the Louisiana Derby, is that it then?
Look, you can chase. I mean, you can come back and run in the Lexington and get the 20 points and end up in the race. Tawny Port did it last year, where he was second or third in the Jeff Ruby, and then won the Lexington and ended up running pretty well in the Derby. But it all depends. Is the Derby the end all be all, or do you have a nice horse? Mm-hmm. You can run the Preakness. You can look at races down the road, the Breeders' Cup going to Dubai next year. Those are all things that individual connections have to weigh out and see what's best for their horse. And it might not just be, qualifying. The good thing is the Derby, and this is why I say the Derby isn't as monumental as other races. An Olympian, for example, they have one crack at it every 4 years. So their qualifiers and they're, into the last day and everything else. It's that, or we'll see you in 4 years. You have other races. You have the Worlds, you have Nationals, you have States, whatever you have. But there's only one Olympics, and it comes every 4 years. With horse racing, yeah, you only have one try at the Derby, and I get that. But there's a lot of other big races around the world that you can still win, and you can still have a great career at and everything else. You don't have to only win the Derby. But there are people that are trying to make the Derby. Steve Asmussen, Brad Cox, even though Brad Cox is credited with a Derby win with Mandaloon. These are two guys in particular that have won seemingly every other race. And they're trying really hard to win the Kentucky Derby. We see them. We'll talk about their horses in the Arkansas Derby as they edge closer. It's a big deal to them to try and win the Derby. For others, they like to win it, but is it at all cost? That's the question.
Is that mostly about legacy? Is that
no? I mean, I think it's partially about legacy, but it's about what it represents, right? I mean, when you go to an airport, or you go to a bar, or you go to a restaurant, and you say to somebody, hey, what do you do for a living? And you say, I'm a trainer, or I own racehorse, I'm a jockey, whatever. The first question that any Joe America is going to ask you is, oh, have you ever won the Kentucky Derby? They don't say, oh, did you win the third at Aqueduct ever? Did you
Yeah.
win a race? No, the British, they say, it's synonymous. The Kentucky Derby in particular, the Triple Crown, of course, in general, but the Kentucky Derby in general.
Yep.
If you're just a blue-blooded American race, sports fan, the Kentucky Derby is the first Saturday in May. You know about the Indy 500. You know about Daytona. Look, you might be a football guy or a baseball guy or whatever the case may be, but the fringe sports.
Yes.
Certain events, and the Kentucky Derby for horse racing in America
Yep.
is our one crack of the apple. Some people know the Breeders' Cup. They might tune in. A lot going on at that time of the year with football and college football that dominates kind of the presses. But the Derby, that makes the bottom line on SportsCenter, right?
Yep.
When you're relevant. And it's funny, people were joking when they came out with that top 10 plays and somebody would make a great play and they go, oh, that's going to make SportsCenter, right? Whether it was a women's softball, college game with a great catch or whatever the case may be, a pole vault or doing something unique. In the Derby, you make the bottom line. You make the scroll bar for the Kentucky Derby. That's how you know that it's relevant in general America.
Well, look, last year we talked about how good the field was. Very, very competitive. I don't know. I mean, we haven't been doing this long enough for me even to be following it like that, but is that something that happens sometimes when you get a really good year and then the next year kind of not as good? You got to wait a little while, but I know it fluctuates up and down, but it just seems like we had such a good year last year, a stable of contenders, and then we get the long shot of all years. And now it's like you said, especially with Instant Coffee not even looking like he may make it as one of the potential favorites. Who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, you look at people's lists, right? I mean, Arabian Night would have been on the top of a lot of people's lists. He's not there. Cave Rock for a while, he's not there. Loggins isn't there. So is this when they line up the first Saturday of May? No matter what happens this week and next week, no matter what happens over these final prep races, I can tell you with assuredness that it won't be the top 20 horses in the world, 3-year-old horses in the world, lining up in the starting.
Yes,
but it's still the Kentucky Derby, and it takes with it everything it is. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. So let's break down these races and see who's going to join some of these others already in the starting gate.
And we will definitely put together a list in a couple of weeks of top contenders. We'll get your take on who you like, because we haven't even done a ranking. So we'll put some rankings together after next week's show, which is pretty much going to be it besides the Lexington. So we're going to start with, and I do have John's picks, by the way. So we're going to start with Forte and the Florida Derby. So there's a little bit of whispering about, since Forte is in post 11, whether or not he'll race. But I look at this field, Chad, and I'm like, well, why wouldn't he race though? Anyway, even from the 11th post position, because this is not a very impressive field. Matter of fact, do you think it's this unimpressive because Forte's in the race?
I think it's a combination of things. I think there are people that don't want to run against Forte. He has respect among almost everybody in the industry that he is undoubtedly right now the leader in the clubhouse. He's the 2-year-old champion. His 3-year-old debut was as perfect can be. Had to be happy with that. Watching his breezes on XBTV, he continues to flourish and thrive. He schooled in the paddock yesterday, looked amazing. So all signs would point to it. The caveat is the fact that post position 11 in the last 6 years or whatever has never had a winner at a race at a mile and an eighth. They're 0 for 12 or 0 for 15.
Interesting.
So to me, yeah, you have to take that with sincerity and you have to look at it. But that being said, look, I looked at all the contenders, all the entrants in this race. I can't find anything.
I know.
I mean, he can brake slowly. He can brake in the parking lot. You get concerned as a bettor When the post comes out and the trainer goes, "Oh no," when the owner comes out and says, "Well, this will be a teaching experience. He's going to learn from this." They're saying all the signs like, if he loses, we're okay. They're already assured a spot. It's almost like they're already assured a spot in the starting gate in the Kentucky Derby. Has more than enough points and everything else. This is like if a team's ranked number 1 in college basketball and they enter into their tournament, the SEC tournament, ACC tournament, and they don't have to win it. They're already going to March Madness. They're the number 1 seed. No matter what happens in this race, they're the number 1 seed, over there at Churchill Downs on the first Saturday in May. So with that being, from a gambling perspective, do you sit there and say, well, do I try and beat Forte? Is there a chink in the armor? But there's not really a chink in the armor, and there's not really a scenario I see here. Even if he breaks slow, even if he gets hung out wide, I still feel like it would be different. The field he faced last time in the Fountain of Youth was much tougher than this race. Wow. So, I mean, you're grasping at straws. The best chances to try and beat him. I mean, if you wanted, you got West Coast Cowboy with Sonny Leon, the Derby winner from last year. He's at least run a couple of races that were respectable enough, although he'd have to get much faster and much better.
His sheet numbers are improving, but they've only improved to a 16 last time out, like you said.
Yeah. I mean, you have Mage, obviously was a well thought of winner first time out.
Actually, we could start with Mage because this is one of John's exacta plays. Mage at 10-1, Saez on board. So yeah. By the way, 2 11s so far.
Yeah. Look, the Connections got very, very upset on Twitter this week when somebody else called the other horse in this race a turtle. They took offense. They said their horse was not a turtle but a horse. It kind of lit up the Twitter world for a week or so.
Okay.
He's run.
Well, the
twice.
Horse doesn't know though, unfortunately.
He's run twice. He won first time out. He was an okay 4th last time. He was very, very green in the stretch. These Connections have done this before and have had some solid results in this race. Hasn't necessarily transferred over to the Kentucky Derby yet. I wish he had a little bit more experience. But that being said, there's not really a whole lot else in this race. So if he were to hit the board, would it surprise me? No. He'll probably end up being the second choice. I know he's
really from 10-1. Okay.
But I mean, I would imagine Forte goes off something closer to 1 to 5. So I can still see this horse being the second choice, but he wouldn't be worth a win wager to me, even if he is 10-1 or something. I have no confidence in him that he's going to win the race, but I do think he can hit the board.
Well, the good thing is when you've only raced twice and both are 11s, that's pretty impressive. That's nice.
It's fine.
But it's only 2 races.
I think it's 2 races, and he's behind the 8 ball, and I think he needs to improve. And look, Louis Saez is a great jockey. He's one of the best jockeys in the world right now. It's one of these things now where it's interesting that, I mean, you would imagine Louis Saez is probably committed to Tapit Trice, but the horse is making his 3rd start, and with the 2 11s, and yet he's on his 3rd jockey. I would have liked to have just a little bit more consistency from that standpoint. But again, in what's a wide open race for second, and somebody has to run second, it could be Maj, but I would not put him in my top 10 list for the Derby, even if he were to run second in the Florida Derby.
Yeah, and both of his races at Gulfstream. John also went with a couple of big monies. He's trying to make some money on the exacta with the heavy favorite, so he's going to go also with the 5, Mr. Peaks, and the 6, Nautical Star. Mr. Peaks went from an 18 to a 13, and Nautical Star, a couple of good numbers, 12 and 13, but hasn't stretched it out. Neither of the 5 and the 6 has stretched it out over 6 furlongs yet.
Look, both of these horses were private purchases following their last races by C2 Racing, the owners of White Barrio. They did it with success with White Barrio. Clint Cornett leading the team from C2. The thing is, when they bought White Barrio, they bought him, I believe, as a 2-year-old after he run his second race as an allowance race, and then kind of he continued to get better and ended up in the Kentucky Derby. This seems a lot like throwing a bunch of what against the wall and hoping it sticks. You start with Mr. Peaks. He's still a maiden, okay? He's run 2 3/4 races and he's run well, but now you're stretching him out to a mile and 1/8, and you're running him in a grade 1 or grade 2, whatever this is now. I think it's what is this? A grade 1 or grade 2?
This is a grade 1.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that this is grade 1 and some of these other ones are not is a little crazy. But
yeah,
look,
right.
Until you break your maiden, I'm not picking Mr. Peaks. I'm sorry, no. Nautical Star, Oklahoma bred, by Dixie Chatter. Look, he won last time. I think he won by a nose at Oaklawn.
Yeah.
Good number, but I mean, geez, it's very difficult for me to say. Again, another one. That was a 3/4 race, and now we're stretching out to a mile and 1/8. It seems like a chase job, and I'm not chasing it. Yes, their prices, they're both 30-1 for Safi Joseph, who's going to end up as the leading trainer at the Gulfstream Park winter meet, championship meet. But
4 horses in the field.
Yeah, and he might have another 3 or 4 in the field at the Wood next week. But just because there's an old saying: if you have 4, you don't have 1. And I'm not.
Well, like you said, he's taking over for the 5 and the 6, which is a trainer upgrade.
They're private purchases, but it's not like he had either of them for that long of a period of time.
No.
Right? Mr. Peaks last ran on March 12th, so not even a month could he have been in his program, even if they bought the horse the next day. And Nautical Star, I think
February 18th.
What's that?
February 18th.
February 18th. So he had his first work for Safi on March 12th.
Maybe Nautical Star seems like maybe the better option, because at least he's got the win and the 13 and the 12, both good races.
But they're sprinting. Yeah. They're sprinting. I'm on a complete wait and see approach, and I applaud Jonathan for swinging for the fences here. It's opening day of baseball season, but this looks like the old thing from Major League 2 where they go fly ball, caught.
Well, the other top contenders, Cyclone Mischief.
He doesn't want to go that far. He will be a very nice miler. Look forward to seeing him in races like the Allen Jerkins at Saratoga, maybe even the race, the 7/8 race at Belmont on Belmont Stakes Day, maybe the Pate Mile. I can see him winning on Kentucky Derby Day, but he doesn't want to go a mile and 1/8. I'm sorry, I don't see it. I've been a fan of this horse. I thought he ran. We gave him out last time. He ran a much improved race last time, but nothing he's shown is that he's going to be better than Forte. And as the distances go further, I think that does not benefit Cyclone Mischief either. So I'm not pro Cyclone Mischief in this race.
Yeah, 3 at Gulfstream this year, ran an 11, a 19, and a 13 last time out. So you can look at the 11 as it bounced to the 19, back forward to a 13. So maybe another forward move for Cyclone Mischief. Fort Bragg is 5-1. You got Rosario, second time out. Yakteen. No, actually, that's Yakteen Baffert craziness. 10, March 4th, finishing 5th at the San Felipe. Well, that's pretty unimpressive. The 10's good, but the 5th isn't.
I mean, scratched out of the race at Sunland Park, where it probably would have been the favorite. I wonder if they're kicking themselves after that horse won the race at Sunland. Look, he's been lightly raced. He's been, thought of not well enough in the barn. But, I mean, to be honest with you, Baffert has 3 Derby contenders left, masquerading in the name Tim Yakteen, and it's National Treasure, Reincarnate, and then Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg is the third of the 3.
Okay.
Expectations are high. I think they were sold a bill of goods that this was going to be a 5-6 horse field. Maybe they can backdoor into the Derby because everybody was scared of Forte. Nobody saw this coming as a 12 horse field. So I think this was kind of taken aback, and by the time they realized there were so many, it was too late to go back to the race at Sunland last weekend.
The 12 horse would possibly be interesting here because the first 3 races went 18, 14, 10. So that's excellent last year. But the first race in Tampa this year at the SF Davis was a complete what the hell happened.
Yeah, WNL was obviously had some momentum after winning the Remsen last year at Aqueduct. Coming out of the gate, he was squeezed at the start, had a lot of traffic trouble. Jose Ortiz certainly willing to throw it out and elects to ride back. With Irad being on the horse that figures, and Jose trying to qualify for the Derby, I can definitely see WNL working out an interesting trip with his older brother leading the way just inside of him. I can see them kind of teaming up here to try and work out a good trip for the two of them.
Yeah, just follow them.
I would imagine WNL gets a cleaner, better trip. Jose Ortiz trying to make the Derby. I don't know how good this horse is or how far he wants to go, to be honest with you. Good Magic obviously was a really, really nice horse, Breeders' Cup winner, ran well in the Derby, but his prodigy, I think, Mile is probably the best for them, and out of a Forest Wildcat mare, which makes me feel like, they'd like to go this horse in particular, even though he won at a 1 1/8 in the Remsen. I don't know he's a true 1 1/8 kind of horse. Look, $400,000 purchase as a yearling. They obviously spent a lot of money on him. Trainer Danny Gargan's off to a little bit of a slow start to his year. But the horse has trained well since coming back from the Sam F. Davis. You like to see that after the suspect performance. I would have liked to see a little bit more further distances. He has basically all half-mile works besides 1 5-furlong move back on March 10th. So, just from a fitness standpoint, because he got nothing out of that first race, you have to almost look at it as that this is his first start since the Remsen.
Yeah.
So is he tight enough will really be the question. But I mean, if I had a gun to my head and I needed to have a second choice, I guess WNL would be it, but it would be a very tepid second choice. I'm not a huge fan. I just don't know where else to go besides Forte.
All right, now we have a more competitive race in the Arkansas Derby, which will go off about an hour and change after the Florida Derby. Not sure why they're starting this race so late. That's not good for viewership.
They're an hour behind, so.
Yeah. All right. Now, let's take a look here, and you've got the favorites. You have Reincarnate at 5-2, Red Route 1, 3-1, and Rocket Can at 4-1. We'll start with... Actually, let's start with John's top pick, which is Rocket Can. The 4-1 shot coming off back-to-back 10s at Gulfstream Park. Now heading over to Oaklawn. Mott, of course, is the trainer of this horse. First at the Holy Bull, second to Forte in the Fountain of Youth. So, what do you like about Rocket Can?
Well, let me start off with this. This Arkansas Derby it's tough to sell because just like the NCAA tournament, there's just been so much parity this year. But you're seeing horses from all different parts of the country come together. Horses who have prepped at fairgrounds in California and Arkansas and Florida. So you get a little bit of an idea, and you're seeing form cycles of what's what. So Rocket Can comes in off that form cycle of the win in Florida and the second behind Forte. Certainly has done everything right this year. Don't blame Connections for ducking Forte. And to be honest with you, with owner Frank Fletcher, who's an Arkansas native, this is the race he always wants to win. He wants to win this race much more than the Florida Derby. So this was always their plan, despite whether or not Forte was in Gulfstream or not. He's got the right running style. Obviously, Bill Mott's had a heck of a year so far, won a lot of big races already. Would be no surprise. I still have some questions. I thought he ran well in Florida. Where is his ceiling? He doesn't broadcast that feeling of brilliance. He doesn't have that wow factor. He was good, workmanlike, but good when he won the Holy Bull. The Fountain of Youth, he was second best, but he was second best. I want to see, this is a chance for Rocky Can to really jump into the Derby scene as a horse with a real shot, as a real contender, for connections that certainly know how to do it. But I want to see more. I'm not sold yet that Rocky Can is the true bill of goods. I think 4-1 is fair odds if you like him. Certainly understand why Jonathan likes him off those back-to-back big races. But I'm going to try and beat him.
The other horse John's going with is the other top contender, and that is Red Route 1, the 10. And this is one of those horses that you usually point out that they don't like, I don't know if they don't like to, but they just don't win. This horse is 3-1 and has raced 7 times and has 1 win.
Yeah. Look, I mean, they're adding blinkers. Steve Asmussen, look, he's 20% when he adds blinkers, but normally on his big horses like that, he normally has a pretty good pulse of what they are and where they are and everything else. And this has been their plan, and Tyler Gaffleone's kind of his flavor of the month right now. He's been riding him a lot. Tyler rode Gunite for him in Dubai over the last weekend. He was able to win a race for some of the connections that I work with and Isolate and the Godolphin Mile. So, look, Tyler's riding is as good as anybody in the world right now, and he'll certainly give it his all. The post position for him won't be as big a deal just because he's a confirmed closer. With the blinkers, maybe he can break just a little bit sharper and not give himself so much to do, and maybe he can just kind of run through the lane. Maybe Steve just has a tendency that he's waiting on horses a little bit. And maybe hesitating going, through holes and stuff. He's run well. He's gotten himself in trouble a lot more. He'd have a little bit of a better record if he didn't cause his own problems. But he tends to cause his own problems. But this right now, I mean, I know he's obviously in the Derby. He ran second at Fairgrounds with Disarm, but this would be his best Derby chance. And Steve's going to give it all he can because, like I said, he wants to win the Derby in the worst possible way. 10,000 career wins, more than 10,000 career wins. In his career, but 0 Kentucky Derbies. He'd like to change this. Now at 10,049 career wins, but 0 Kentucky Derbies. So he would certainly like to change that, and he hopes that Red Route 1 is the one. But again, not a ton of early speed signed up in this race. Maybe Reincarnate can kind of control those early fractions, but not a ton of early speed in this race.
Yeah, matter of fact, the one that I just noticed that wants to lead from the last race was Two Eagles River, the Hartman horse, who ran his best race at Oaklawn Park at a mile. He hasn't gone further than a mile, but he ran an 11, and he went coast to coast from the 1 position.
No, look, at 10-1 odds, I don't blame anybody for taking a long look at him. Chris Hartman, 34% on the meet at Oaklawn as we're getting ready to close. It seemingly can do no wrong. He has the right running style, again, in a race that doesn't have a lot of pace in it. It's going to be interesting to see, though, if he hooks up early with Reincarnate, if John Velasquez is determined to try and make the lead early with Reincarnate, which I think he will. How fast do they go? Does Two Eagles River need the lead? Those will be the questions. But, certainly at 10-1, if you wanted to take a swing at Two Eagles River, I couldn't blame you.
Yeah. The price is nice. The other horse John has is Angel of Empire, the 9-2, the number 6. This is the Cox Pratt connection. So if you can get Cox and Pratt on a good horse at close to 5-1, you're tempted. The sheet line is nice. On dirt, it's 27, 18, 16, and 12. So that's going in the right direction. The winner of the Risen Star
was good that day. I mean, beat the other Brad horses that we liked a little bit more. I think I thought we liked a few of those horses in the Risen Star more than Angel Empire. He was the third. I think Brad had 3 in the race that day. He worked out the right trip. It was a great ride that day by Luis Saez. Luis Saez was just a maestro all day long, just putting on some masterful performances. The thing, and look, out of that race, obviously 2 fills came back, and he won the Jeff Ruby Stakes last weekend. The thing with Angel of Empire that I find interesting, and I understand that Louis was committed to Instant Coffee and Tappet Trice and, has his share of other horses. The fact that Louis stays in Gulfstream to ride Maj and not come here for a $1.2 million grade 1 in Arkansas with a horse he just won a Derby prep on speaks volumes to me. And maybe I'm overthinking it. Maybe I'm overlooking into it. But the fact that Louis doesn't ride back, and listen, that's no knock on Flavian Pratt. Flavian Pratt rode Kingsbarn phenomenally. Looks like he's kind of rattling back into form after having a really, really slow winter. But man, the fact that Louis not here, it speaks a little bit to me. Maybe too much. Maybe I'm overthinking it. but I'm going to try and beat Angel of Empire.
All right. And then I think the only other horse John has in play is Bourbon Bash, the 15-1 shot, the D. Wayne Lucas horse, who's coming off back-to-back 12s this year.
And look, this was a horse that, again, when the race was on Fox Sports, Naira's broadcast team proclaimed him the Kentucky Derby winner when he broke his maiden, and he still hasn't won another race since then.
He ran an 11 that day.
He's danced every dance. He's run 9 times. Rider change from Mikel Michel, who's ridden him well and ridden him very much all the time in the morning time for Coach Lucas, to switch to Reylu Gutierrez over here. I just don't see it. No real excuse in the Rebel. Obviously, Coach is not afraid to put him in the starting gate and let him run and see what they figure out. But he's just too inconsistent for me, and even his top performance, it's not a winning performance. So this would very much be like Princeton winning a March Madness game.
Yeah.
So does it, Rashad?
Yeah. we know that can't happen. All right, and so let's talk about the favorite, Reincarnate. So this is the one that we want. Obviously we want to make money, and we're not going to make money in the Florida Derby. So we don't want Reincarnate to win. Then we'd be in big trouble trying to cash in on Derby preps on Saturday. So you got Velazquez, the horse in the last 2 races this year, ran an 11 at Santa Anita in the Sham. That was that win in that race, and then a 12 last time out at Oaklawn Park in the Rebel, finishing 3rd. So that was a disappointing race after the race in January.
Yeah, look, I mean, Bafford's made this trip many times before, okay? And he's done it with success. At the end of the day, the Rebel 3rd was a solid performance that day. That was an interesting race where Confidence Game ran a big race. We haven't seen him since. It was a fine effort after, really a bad break. I don't think that was their plan, was to come from so far out of it. And he closed well. He ran on well. This has been their plan since then to go back to Arkansas and try and complete the mission. He's trained very well for Tim Yakteen, with Bob Baffert probably standing next to him watching these breezes. A little bit inconsistent, though. Normally a Baffert horse will breeze every 7 days. And this horse, to be honest with you, and look, things are so different in California right now, because when it rains, you can't even train, let alone work out or anything like that. So everything's kind of different. But this horse, he breezed 9 days apart, then he came back and breezed 8 days apart. They're very unlike kind of Bob Baffert moves and stuff like that. That being said, certainly worked well. 112-2, 2 back, and then he came back with a 59-4 before he got on the plane to head to Arkansas. Could he win? Absolutely. But I'm going to try and beat him as well.
Yeah, and this is nowhere near the favorite of Forte, of course. So,
well, I mean, to be honest with you, why is this horse the favorite is the better question. I know he had off the board in 6 career starts. Okay, it took him a little while to break his maiden. He ran second behind a couple of Baffert horses 3 times before breaking his maiden. Then he came back and he won the Sham. But the Sham, to me, if you really look within the race, the Sham was a 5-horse field where the second choice in the race broke down. So it became a 4-horse race. Paxa Wallop is a turf horse, so it's really a 3-horse race. And there were 3 Baffert horses between Reincarnate, Newgate, who disappeared after that, and National Treasure, who we haven't seen. We're going to see in the Bluegrass, who's had some soundness issues. So what did he beat that day? That race was a mile. He only won by a neck. He wasn't really pulling away from Newgate.
Rocket Can should probably be the favorite, right? Rocket Can has the 2 10s. Reincarnate's never had a 10.
Yeah, I would think, but it's the Baffert Johnny V, factor, and obviously from American Pharoah on forward, he certainly had a lot of success over here in the Arkansas Derby. So understand why this horse is, but yeah, they should vie for favoritism. But I'm going to try and beat all of them with a big price.
Oh, okay. Which price is that?
So I love a horse that I think you have to use across the board.
Yes.
30-1 on the morning line.
Ooh, 30-1.
It's the number 9 horse,
King Russell.
This is a horse. I don't know the sheet line on him. You can tell me the sheet line now.
This year, 15 and then a 16.
Yeah. So on the sheets, he's not going to be impressive. On the numbers, he's not going to be impressive. If you go back and you watch his race, and look, he just broke his maiden last time. Okay, but it's different than a horse like Maj, who only has 2 career starts, because he has the seasoning of 5 career starts, and he's the kind of horse who's getting better at the right time. Okay, these are connections that normally they're not Derby dreaming, Derby chasing 30-1 shots, in it for the free lunch kind of thing. If you go back and you watch his races, he's a difficult horse to ride because it takes him a minute to kind of get going. But his closing kick, especially the last 2 races, but even before, if you can kind of, study the race and actually just almost ISO on him, I almost feel like I wish we had the capability of being like John Madden, where you're circling some things and boom, he's going to go over here. If you watch the replays on King Russell, this horse should not be 30-1. He's a horse with a very, very, very promising future. Whether or not he's ready for the moment on Saturday will be the question. But I'm telling you, he's going to run a big race. He's going to close, and he's not going to sit there and take money where he's going to be 30-1 morning line and he's 10-1. He's going to be every bit of 30-1, if not higher. And I'm telling you, this horse is going to run a monster race.
Wow.
On Saturday. I know the last couple of races were on wet tracks. I don't think it was the wet track that moved him up. I think this horse is getting good at the right time. He's run many races at Oaklawn, which I think is an advantage over some of these horses who have not been at Oaklawn before. He's training well. I saw a video of him schooling in the paddock yesterday for trainer Ron Moquette, and he looks amazing. Filling out at the right time, really, really looks the part. And I'm expecting a big performance here from King Russell on Saturday at 30-1.
What is WL?
What's that?
And next to the condition of the race? You got GD good. You got SY sloppy. What's WL?
Should be WF.
Oh, WF. What is that?
Yeah, wet fast.
Wet fast.
Yeah.
So where does that fit in?
It's just it was a wet track, but it had some moisture in it, but it was still fast. I mean, I don't know.
Fast enough.
See the water on the track, but I guess.
Yeah, I mean, what you could also see is after the 21 in December, which is basically it's New Year's Eve. So a month later, you get the 15. So you then, predictably, a month later, you bounce a little bit to a 16 on the sheets. You get the win anyway. So that's a good sign saying, all right, well, you got the 15 out of the way. You bounced a little bit to the 16. So let's expect another forward move after the 15. And you've got second, first in the 3 races at Oaklawn.
Yeah, no,
all with Bejarano.
Yeah, I think he's getting better at the right time in the year in all sports where we've seen all sorts of crazy upsets. If we're talking next Thursday and we say, hey, what about that performance?
Yeah, I hope so. I'll be putting money on him.
Derby.
I'll thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm expecting a big performance from here.
Who's Ron Marquette?
Ron Marquette's a great trainer. He had that horse Whitmore that everybody fell in love with.
Whitmore, okay.
So he's an Arkansas native. Worked for Bernie Flint for a long time. He's been on his own for quite some time now. He won a Grade 1 Stephen Foster once with a horse he bought like literally 3 weeks before from Nick Zito. He's almost won 1,000 races. He had 945 career victories in his life, including the $4.5 million that Whitmore made that he was co-owner on. So certainly a guy that knows what he's doing. He was on the Derby Trail a little bit back in the day with Four Right. He had an Arkansas bred on the Derby Trail a little bit, but this horse would be, again, right now he doesn't appear to be that kind, but I think we're gonna hear a lot from him, and I'm expecting a big performance.
All right, so let's wrap it up with the picks. So going back to the Florida Derby, John is going to go with Forte, of course, and he's going to try to make some money with the 4, the 5, and the 6. And you're just pretty disgusted about the race in general. And then at Oaklawn, John's going with the 7, Rocket Can with the 1, 6, and the 10. I'll go with the 4, 6, and the 7. And I'm also now going to definitely put the 9 in there with a few bucks on the win bet for the 9 too. But my bet's 4, 6, 7. Chad, you've got the 9, and who else do you have?
Yeah, I'll go with the 9 King Russell, and I'd play him. I would use in the race the 2 horse who we didn't talk about, Interlock Empire. I think he's going to run a big race for Kenny McPeak.
Really?
2 Eagles River for Chris Hartman,
4.
and then Rocket Cam and Reincarnate.
Okay, so 7 and the 8. Wow, that's a lot. All right, well, but the main one is the 9.
The whole thing in that situation is you're keying on the price horse, right?
Yes.
So what you can do is you play a horse like King Russell at those odds, and you play like trifectas where you single him in first, second, and third, play the other ones in the other 2 spots. The ticket ends up not being as expensive as you really think that it could be, because it's really 4 by 4 by 1. So it's like a $16 ticket times 2. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's $16 each way. It's a $48 ticket for $1 try, where you're keying him in 3 spots.
Okay.
And if he wins with some of those other prices we have, including McPeak's horse, the 2 Interlock Empire, and the 4 2 Eagles River.
Oh yeah.
You're talking about balloons.
Yeah, that's a beautiful exact trifecta right there.
Yeah.
If we could find a way to even get let's see, yeah, that would be what? That would be a 2, a 9, and a 4 exacta box.
Yeah.
Let's try to make some money off that one.
You just do it. I mean, obviously, look, you have to respect Red Route 1 for those connections, and you know he's going to be closing, and he run second or third short, but try and beat him if we can.
Next week we'll do 3 races. These are the 3 big ones, the last 3 big ones. Aqueduct, you got the Wood. By the way, the Grade 1 Carter Handicap is on that card. Keeneland, you got the Bluegrass with the Madison, the Grade 1 Madison on the Keeneland card. And Santa Anita Derby with the Santa Anita Oaks on the card. So appreciate it, Chad. Hopefully we'll be able to lock you guys together again next week. I'm sure we will, because you're here in the United States, and John will have a week to fix his computer.
There you go.
I'll talk to you next week. Thanks, Chad.